Can I say thank you for that welcome, and thank you for inviting me here today. One thing I do have to correct you on, David, when you said I was well prepared to come into defence in the IT world. Nothing prepares you for coming into defence in the IT world. I guess I was probably as prepared as I could have been. I thought today I'd like to take the opportunity to start with a little bit of where we're coming from, what the position was, where we're at, and what we can see in the next little while as we start to bed in the wave of reform that we're currently undertaking. But I'd also like to spend a little bit of time, because I think defence has actually reached the point where, as we bed in this wave, we have to start thinking about the next one. Because as tempting as it would be to finish the program that we're currently on, have nothing much going on and spend a bit more time on the golf course, I don't actually think that's a viable option for us. So we need now to start thinking of where we need to go to. Most of you, I think, are pretty aware that it's a fairly diverse environment that we're actually running in defence. So we have restricted, secret, top secret, and we also have unclassified security classifications. We have data, voice and video. We're fixed and deployed instances. We have domestic interfaces between ourselves and other government agencies and the national security and law enforcement agencies. And we have coalition interfaces as we get the ability to work with our coalition partners. It becomes increasingly important. We access about 8 satellite constellations, or in fact, one of the few things I can say is it's exactly 8 satellite constellations. We have 2 core data centres and about 200 data rooms. Now, these are not a cupboard in the corner. This is rooms with racks and racks and racks of servers in them. About 6,000 Windows servers, Unix, AIX, Solaris, 2,800 applications on the DRN and another 1,100 on the DSN, and about 110,000 workstations. So it's a big, complex environment. This year, would expect to spend around $84 million in capital, $114 million in salary, and $643 million in suppliers expenses. So that's about the size of the budget. So if I go back to a couple of years, and Nick Warner, who was the then secretary of the department, actually made a speech where he referred to the defence broken backbone. He wasn't only referring to IT, but it was certainly foremost in his thoughts, as he had told me several times. And just a couple of quotes from Nick's speech. Our deployed forces operate on different systems to those used in Australia. And I had a very informed moment when Angus Houston, who was the then CDF, said after I'd been in defence about 6 months, you'd better come over to Afghanistan and Iraq, as it was then, and have a look at the IT over there, which I did. And understanding that the people on the ground were working on a different set of kit than they were working on in Australia. And I remember one time in Iraq, the guys just saying to me, look, we've got this kit, we don't know how to use it. This is the first time we've seen it. So that actually had a big impression on me, and I remember saying to Angus as we walked back that we've actually got to do better than this. I think Peter was with me on that trip, in fact. We have to do better than that, and he said, that's why you're here. So we did. We have 200 data centres. We are one of the most technologically advanced militaries in the world, but the system we use to pay our reserves still uses 1980s style green screen technology. That's not true anymore, we've changed that. So that bit of Nick's speech we've actually addressed. Of the challenges we face, improving our information systems is the one that promises the greatest reward. And that's essentially the start of the journey that we've started to take within defence. So, if I think about what the problem was, we had old technology, that there was inadequate asset management. I couldn't tell you how many servers we had. I couldn't tell you what their utilisation rate, and I couldn't tell you what their life of type was. We had ad hoc purchases. I think at one stage I had a look that we had about 1,700 different vendors working within the group. It's relatively difficult to have any form of ongoing relationship with 1,700 vendors. There was no overarching architectural governance. I didn't know how much I was spending, which was an amazing place to be in. We didn't have the right basics. The basics weren't there, and yet we were still ad hoc investments in various bits and pieces around, which weren't working because the basics weren't there. So we didn't have a stable, consolidated, simplified core that was affordable. So that was very much the driver that for me as we headed off on the journey. We spent 93% of our money on sustainment and 7% on new capability, which once again is actually unsustainable. One of the things that I did to try and actually get a fairly clear view of what it is that we were trying to do is I actually produced a document, and it was about a 2 to 3 page document, and it was clearly said this is what success would look like, and it was written in business terms, and there was several iterations of it, and I was very clear that no one was allowed to put any IT terms in the document. So this is the sort of the synthesis of where we got to. We said that there is a secure and robust IT capability that supports warfighting and business requirements. So we had to fix up the environment and make it stable and make it responsive to the people. So we had all defence personnel, regardless of location, can access and share information and collaborate with defence, government, industry, allied and coalition partners. We need to consolidate and standardise equipment, and we procure through centralised frameworks via strategic and enduring relationship with fewer vendors, and that there would be one service provider for ICT. So about 4 years ago when we drafted this, I figured if we did that, we'd probably be doing okay by the end of it. But the critical thing was I was actually able, and that endured, I was actually able to bring out that document when every time people had a really, really good and bright idea to go and do something else, which one of those is this addressing? And buy-in from the organisation and buy-in from the people working. So, what have we actually done, and where are we actually positioned at the moment? So, beefing up our data centre consolidation. We now have a new Tier 3 data centre operating in Sydney, and we are progressively moving our core applications up to Sydney so we have the proper redundancy and the proper resilience that you would expect in an organisation of this size. That's in train, it is operating. We moved ADF Pay up into that data centre recently. The rest are starting to follow now over the next little while. Next generation desktop, that is also in pilot. What we call a next generation desktop is that a thin client virtualised desktop, so that on your desktop, instead of having the multiple terminals that people currently have, ultimately there will be one terminal with one little box and one keyboard that will be able to provide you secret, restricted, or protected now, unclassified and coalition networks, all through a single desktop on your desk. That's been piloted at the moment, and it is, I can assure you, very well received. I expect to get second pass approval from the government on that within the next 2 months, and we will start rolling that out in earnest right across defence for the rest of this year and into next year. Terrestrial communications, we received first pass approval for that in February 11. We've been out to tender, we've down selected two vendors, Telstra and Optus, and we would expect to complete a decision and seek government approval to proceed by the end of this year. And I think it's that for me is actually going to be quite a game changer for defence. I'm not sure that we've yet realised just what a change that will be. So when that rolls out for the first time, all defence users will have access to ubiquitous, uniform, high quality, reliable network. So for the first time, everyone will have access to the DRN, and if you need it, the DSN. There will be one seamless set of networks across Australia that interoperate correctly. People will have access at their desktop to video conferencing, chat, all the other tools that people now expect from a modern IT world. So people will be able to get on the DRN and connect by video to someone else in the DRN wherever they go. We will combine that with what we are now starting to roll out, which is BYO endpoint, bring your own endpoint. I was sick of people telling me how much they loved Apple. I hope there's no one from Apple. Yeah. Not that I have anything against Apple, I use it myself, but it wasn't part of the environment. It struck me that as long as you have the proper usage and the proper security, I don't care what sort of endpoint you want to use. You want to use Apple, use Apple. You want to use it from your own home, and you want to use an iPad, use an iPad, use an iPhone. I don't care. As long as you use it through the appropriate security mechanisms, I was fine with that. So we'll have this network around Australia. We'll have bring your own endpoint for those people that want to use something a bit different. We're also just on the point of, for some of our limited applications, like personnel putting in leave forms and things like that, just do it over the internet so that you'll be able, wherever you are, lodge your leave forms and stuff like that over the internet. So we'll be rolling that out in the next little while as well. And we'll have better linkages between the fixed and deployed environments. So that, I think, will be a very significant change for Defence, to have that level of connectivity right across the Defence organisation. We needed to consolidate. We've started to retire applications. We've managed to retire about 200, but it's hard. People are not resisting the retiring of the applications, but they say, as long as you can give me something that will do this, I'm fine. The problem is, to give them something that does this and to migrate all their data and stuff is actually difficult. We have a prioritised program of work. We managed to spend all our money in the ICT world nowadays. The first year I was here, I think we had a budget of nearly 700 million. I remember handing back 100 million because I couldn't spend it. We didn't have the mechanisms in place to be able to spend it. Well, we've managed to overachieve for the last 2 years on that, and I think now it is quite clear to the organisation that however much money you give me, I can spend it wisely and well. And I remember talking to Peter Jones, now Vice Admiral Jones, when he was the head of ICT operations. He said, you know, success would look like being able to spend all the money you're given. Well, we've actually managed to do that, to the point where I'm bringing back to the Defence Committee, or the SCAC as it's now called, the week after next, a program of work that says, here is the amount of money and people you have given me. This is the best fit that I think, based on the priorities I've been given, this is the best fit we can actually get to. If I got it wrong, that's fine, I'll change it. But if you tell me to spend more on that, you also have to tell me which one to spend less on. And I don't care, but it has to be a zero-sum game. Now that is going to be a very interesting discussion. I've already been talking to the service chiefs and group heads, and they all want more, as you can imagine. We have to make our financial and FTE savings. We are on track to achieve our SRP savings of 1.948 billion, and I have no doubt that we will achieve them. I'm quite confident of that. We need to improve our maturity, and particularly at the portfolio and program level. Portfolio management was not something we did very well. We need to improve our oversight, our governance. We need to set architectural standards, and we need to have an architecture that we can actually move to. So they're all the things that are sort of driving this current wave of reform. And if I could just go to a case study for a minute. And I'll use Talisman Sabre 11, which is an exercise that is held every 2 years, where the Army, Navy, Air Force can all try out their wares. We used Talisman Sabre 11 to try out how we were going as well, particularly in the information sharing space. So we took on the challenge of actually doing a lot of the IT work in that and actually setting that up. What we actually did is decided that it would be better, particularly with the US as the primary people in there, if we could all use our national systems to actually fight wars on, without actually worrying about setting up completely different networks. So what we said was, what do we have to do to connect the US secret system called Supernet and the Australian DSN? So through I won't go into the architecture clearly, but we set them up so that you could actually access, if you were authorised to, you could actually access Supernet from your DSN terminal. And what we are able to provide for that exercise is email, so that you could hit send with attachments to anyone on the Supernet. They could hit reply and send it back to you. And I wouldn't underestimate just how popular that was when we first set that up. We could do web browsing. So if I was authorised to, I could get across onto the secret web system within the US and access those sites that I was entitled to access, and they could do the same. We had chat going through continuously. We had VoIP, voice over IP, operating between the coalition forces. The complex applications, so we had things like apart from the common operating picture, we had targeting, joint targeting and other applications which you could access via this system, and the command and control systems. So we learnt a lot from Talisman Sabre 11, which is the intention of these exercises, but just a couple of brief stats. On the collaboration field, we had during the period of Talisman Sabre, the couple of weeks that is the height of it, there was 110,000 emails moved between the DSN and Supernet, and 48 gigabytes of data was transferred between the US and Australian systems. There were 2 million Supernet website visits, so there was 2 million hits on the Supernet website, and they were accessed by authorised DSN users with 32.5 gigabytes of data downloaded. There was 700,000 DSN website hits by people from the US side, and there were 690,000 discrete text chat posts during that period of time. So what we've actually learnt from that is what worked, what didn't work, what people wanted, what they didn't want, and we are now putting in place the robust, ongoing capability that will allow us to work with our US colleagues. And we have now had agreement for the other members of the Five Eyes community, US, UK, New Zealand and Canada, where we will work with that, so that capability will be available right across the Five Eyes. So once again, it's setting a base in place and then industrialising the base. This is an area, if I can just move on very quickly, but on where we actually are headed. Those bottom layers of the stack, the network, the infrastructure, the data enablers and data management, and the SOA, that's the integration services, we're very much focused on putting that layer there at the moment, all those layers there. I've described it as secret IT business to my colleagues in Defence Committee. I will do that, no one else will. When you want to do something, you will use the Defence one. You won't go and develop your own. But it will be like electricity, like your electric light. Turn on the light, it'll work. Don't worry about anything else, just that it works and it's relatively cheap. This is where we need to start putting our attention to, and the services, the applications and the user interfaces. I mentioned BYO endpoint, people who want to use iPads, etc. Mobile is where IT is going. If you haven't got mobile, you haven't got IT in the modern world. So that whether they want to use the Android or whichever operating system they want to use. They want to be able to do it wherever they want to do it, whenever they want to do it. We have to be able to do that. App stores is an interesting one. I remember talking to a group of systems integrators and saying, if you think you're competing against each other, you're kidding. What you're actually competing against is an app store, because that's where people want these instantaneous. They want to be able to download the application and they want to use it. They don't want to spend 2 years designing it, another 3 years building it, and another year after that learning how to use it properly. I've used this example before. In the US Army uses an application for an iPhone called a ballistics calculator. And because I don't shoot rifles, I might get this a little bit wrong, but the principle will be right. It is, you put in your wind speed, your muzzle velocity, the round you're using, etc., and it helps you correct the aim. Now, they are actually using that. The US Army is actually using it. It costs $10.95, and they can pull it down immediately and start using it. That is what people are going, IT shops are going to compete against. And not, if you're going to take 3 years to deliver it, you might as well not start. It'll be obsolete before you go. But we need to start concentrating a lot more on that top layer. And we need to have a single information environment. And when I talk about the way forward, the emphasis is on information, not on technology. That's the next wave of reform that I actually think we need to start thinking about how we would do that. We need to support battle space and corporate decision making through the timely provision of accurate, relevant information. Now, we've started to do a bit of that, but we've got a lot more that we need to go. We have just set up, and I'll just use an example of the demand. We've just used up collaboration as a service based around SharePoint, which allows people across the defence organisation to collaborate. So they wanted to use information, they wanted to collaborate, they wanted to share. We entered into a partner with partnership to do this with HP, that's your plug for the day. And we started running that in 2011. We've got 114 established sites, and we have templates that people can use and share information. How popular is it? A few weeks ago, it was our highest transaction volume on the DRN. There was 44 million transactions across that service for the week. So people are absolutely using it. If we look at the growth from Q1 to Q2, the number of unique visitors went from 4,900 to 18,566, which is a 275% increase. Page views went up by 164%, and search queries went up by 8,860%. So people are starting to use it. They are starting to understand the use of collaborative technologies, and that, I think, also is something we need to do a bit more of. I'll just go back a little bit and then I'll finish off. When I'm talking about to my people what it is that we need to do in the next wave, so we've almost got this back end. I hate to say this because something will go wrong now, but data center consolidation is happening. The network consolidation is happening. We've started application consolidation. It's starting to happen. Those big ticket items, we've got a integration layer at the restricted level. We're now moving to one at the secret level. They're starting to happen. Now's the time for us to start thinking about it, what we want to do next. And for me, it's actually all about information. So if I think back to when I was at school or even when I was at uni, if you could actually go and research a topic, you get good research from credible sources, you could write it down, it was interesting, there was good information there. Generally speaking, and you could write a little bit, you generally got reasonable marks to do that. Well, that doesn't really count anymore, in my view. It's actually quite different. Now we have the opposite problem. We have information overload. We have information coming at us from all sides. It's not hard to get information. It's actually hard to work out what to do with it. And I think our decision-making models are still back there, not where we need to have them here. There is a term for it in the IT world. It's called infobesity, and that's that is the move we're moving into now. And if you just think about it yourself, if you get information, you get it face-to-face, telephone, email, SMS, Facebook, RSS feeds, Twitter, television, internet reading, and some people read newspapers as well. The amount of information there is just amazing. Some of it is duplicated. The ease of duplication now is very interesting. You can just do it. The ease of transmission, you can send it to whoever you want almost instantly. There's no way, because you don't have context, and a lot of it you can judge its reliability because you don't get a context around it. Some of the information is contradictory, or at least apparently contradictory. So how do you actually make a decision when you're bombarded with information, you don't know the reliability of it? It is happening really quickly. So we need to store it. Now, storage is good now. I probably shouldn't say this publicly, but storage in the IT world is becoming cheaper. We can store lots of information. It does have to be discoverable though. No point in storing it if you can never get it back and use it. That is the hard part. We need to have models in place that will actually allow us to make sense of this information as it starts bombarding us. Because the human brain, or the manager or the commander or whoever it is not going to be able to do that without proper models, decision-making models, and a decision-making tool set. So what I'm actually saying to my folk is we need to start thinking about the information. We need to get models to deal with the information. We need to be able to discover it and present it in such a way that people can make sense of it, and it needs to be mobile. Of course, they don't want to do it at their desktop. They want to do it wherever they want to do it, and they want to do it whenever they want to do it. I think that's the next phase for us, and if we don't actually turn our mind to that, if we don't actually in defence really start putting our intellectual capital into what that looks like, and the good news in this is a lot of this is not actually really expensive. It's actually hard, but it's not all that expensive. We need to actually put that effort into actually the intellectual bit of it. And that's a long way away from the access database issue we have in defence at the moment. We have 55,000 access databases on the restricted network. And then people wonder why they can't find the information. So if I have a feeling of what to do next, which will be for my successor, I think that's what we have to do. So thank you very much for that. I think the idea now we have a break and come back for questions if you